So we've talked about how do you find that pool of talent. Let's talk a little bit about building a high-performance team. So something that may seem very small can be very big, and that's having an identity for your team. So at Unbounce, our sales team are the whale sharks. Every team with an Unbounce has a mascot. We chose the whale sharks because they're intelligent animals, but they don't eat their prey. And we want to be aggressive as a sales team in growing revenue for the company, but we want to do that in a way that is delightful for our prospects and our customers. And so we felt like whale shark was a good representation of that. So we've got stuffed whale sharks floating around our office. At Halloween, we built this massive whale shark costume for our Halloween party, and everybody was under it, and it was a lot of fun. So by doing something like that and giving your team an identity, it goes to building team chemistry. And let's face it, sales can be stressful. And if you can build a team that works together, plays together, and they can depend on each other, it breeds success. If one person's successful and they care about the rest of their team, then everybody wants to see everybody successful, and they're going to work together. So here's a picture of our sales team early on in our sales process. One thing that I would recommend is that you evaluate the roles that you have on your team. Do you have the right roles to be highly successful? When I created my hiring plan for Unbounce, when I started there and was going to build up the team, I mapped out my first 10 positions for the year. I had sales operations at number 10 at the end of the year. About 3 months in, I went, whoa, I need that role now. I did not put enough importance on that role. So I redid my plan and I hired sales operations, and that has been critical to the success of building out our sales team. You also want to make sure that you have the right type of people on your team. So when I worked at Active, when we were client server, we really needed a hunter and a certain type of person to go out and do that upsell. As we transitioned that business into a SaaS model, we needed a person who was more nurturing in that role. So evaluate your roles and make sure that you're hiring the right type of people for them. And I would recommend that you do this at least twice a year. In the SaaS business, things change so quickly. The type of customer that you're targeting. Do you need to go through a legal process? You've got way more customers. So if you can review that twice a year and just sit down and spend some time and ask yourself, do I have the right roles to be a high-performing team? You can be more nimble. You can see our team is fairly casual. We have a lot of fun. I want to make sure that I'm hiring people that are going to fit into this role. If you hire one person who doesn't fit into your team, then it can really impact the chemistry. So here's a guy in a suit. He's a great salesperson. He's used to a corporate environment. He works very big deals. So as far as him fitting in my team, I would never hire him. As fantastic as he is as a salesperson, he does not fit into this model. So I wouldn't hire him. But I would actually marry him. He's been my husband for 13 years. Whatever type of team you're building out, make sure that you're delivering a delightful sales experience, because if your sales experience stands out, it's a competitive advantage. And one of those ways to stand out is to have a great sales methodology. Sales is a set of complex events. So you want to make sure that you can take that and chunk it out into an easy format and a repeatable process. It has to be something that your sales team can adopt and use easily, because if it's difficult, they're not going to use it. And having a repeatable process allows you as a sales leader to manage your business better. You've got information about your sales stages, about your types of customers. You implement your sales methodology into your stages, into your CRM, and you've now got data and insights. And you want to make sure that you train your staff continuously on this. It's not good enough to just set up a sales methodology and then say go. You should have repeatable trainings. I do a training session every quarter, and I will not only do that myself, I have my sales staff do that and train the rest of the team on certain components, because I know if my sales staff can train the rest of the staff on how to use it, then they know it very well, and they're going to do better in their individual role. I also like to role play on the methodology. So for instance, one of our components is get a list of issues. And you're inclined to get one issue and dive into it. I want my reps to get all of their issues and then dive into it. So we practice that structure on a weekly basis to make sure that people are getting comfortable and getting good habits. If you don't have a sales methodology and a consistent process, you're living in the wild, wild west. Everybody is doing their own thing. You don't have a handle on what's happening. Your sales reps can't anticipate what questions you're going to ask them in your one-on-one, and you're not going to have that data and insight. So don't live there. Team building is often overlooked, and it is so important. Don't underestimate the power of fun. By getting out of the office and having a team event, it allows you to laugh, it allows you to plan and team build. So whether you're doing a snowshoe trip, where someone has to plan the trip, someone's got to organize the cooking, or you're doing an event just outside of the office where it's got something around problem solving, you're doing team building and you're having fun at the same time. I will often invite special guests to our events, and that could be someone from the marketing team or our support team, someone who has helped sales be successful that quarter as a form of reward, and say, hey, we know that as a sales team that there's so many other people who help us sell, and thank you very much for helping us. And then the other thing is that I mentioned we have an office in Berlin, Montreal, and Vancouver. We're not all together at the same time, and so we'll do remote games. Once a month, we'll book an hour on a Friday that's consistent with time zones. We'll use something called Jackbox, where simply for an hour, we'll play a game and have some laughs, and make sure that everybody's included in that. Strong teams are diverse teams. Is anybody familiar with Strengthsfinder? Couple people? Great. So we use this at Active and at Unbounce. And the idea behind Strengthsfinders, it's by Gallup, and they've written a book on all of the data that they've collected from years and years and thousands of people. And the idea is that you use what you're good at, what your strengths are, in order to achieve your goals. And it's not to say, don't worry about your weaknesses. It's about how do you be successful using your talents. And as a leader, you want to, as you're building out your teams, make sure that you have a team that has talents across the board. So Strengthsfinders, you do a quiz, it's like 70 questions, and they give you your 5 strengths. And then they're broken out into 4 categories: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic planning. And as a leader, if you look at your team and your people have talents from all of these different categories, you've got a well-rounded team. For myself, most of my talents fall within executing and influencing. And so I want to make sure that if I'm doing something like a strategic session, I'm going to involve somebody from my team who's got strengths in the strategic category, because I know that's not my forte, so I want to bring people who have different views and ways of thinking so that we can plan better. Speaking of strategic thinking, that's another key to having a high-performing team. If you're not doing strategic planning right now, it's something that you should take away and start doing. I do a strategic planning session once a year where we plan out our goals for the year and how we're going to achieve them. And then I do a quarterly session to look at progress, how we're tracking against that goals, and do we need to change anything. If you're not currently doing strategic planning, and you find doing an annual planning session daunting, I would recommend starting out with a quarterly plan, and then you can build from there. Let's talk a little bit about the hiring process. So as we talked about, it's so important to make sure that you get the right people onto your team. And if it's so expensive, if you hire the wrong person and you find out 3 months after the fact, they're not the right fit. You've invested all this time on onboarding them, and they're not a fit for your team. So you need to have a really good hiring process that's consistent, so you can make sure that you're evaluating and hiring the right people. Because as Kristen said, if it's not a yes, then it's a no. Maybe doesn't count. So 5 things that I look for when I'm hiring is I want people who are achievers. They're goal-oriented, they want to be successful, and they want to win. I look for people who are coachable. It doesn't need to be the person who has the most experience. If I deem someone to be very coachable, then I will rank that higher than a wealth of experience. I want people who can relate to customers, prospects, to the rest of the team, and also to myself, because we need to have a good synergy and communication amongst our team. Accountability is so important. I want people who follow through and do what they say they're going to do for prospects or customers, because that's something that irks people so greatly. And also that they're going to be accountable to me as the leader. They're going to hit their sales quotas. They're going to at least do their best to do that. And if they've got a special project, that they're going to finish that on time, and they're going to do their best quality work. And finally, belief. If you're going to succeed, you need to believe you're going to succeed. And if you don't have belief, then you're not going to hit your quota as a sales rep. And so that's so important for me. So at Unbounce, we have a bit of a creative way of how we hire. We do not accept resumes. Our company builds landing pages. Well, we don't build them, we provide the tool, and everybody else builds them. If you apply for a job at Unbounce, you need to create your resume in a landing page. And so that's a great way for us to read out applicants, because if people don't want to take the time to build out their resume in the landing page, then we know they're not really wanting a job at Unbounce. And by building on a landing page, people get the opportunity to show a little bit of who they are as a person, as well as their work experience. So here's a couple examples for you. This is Phil, one of my sales reps. He loves to hike. He's got the background on one of the hikes he did to Nepal. And I can also see his work experience. And then the page continues down. This is Emily. She's an Olympic bronze medal soccer player for Canada. So right off the bat, I know that she's an achiever and that she's competitive. So here's my process that I follow for interviews. And the first stage is a screen. If you've already gone out for coffee and you've met that person, you may bypass this stage because you're already very certain that there's someone that you want to continue down the interview process. But if they're not, you need to screen them. If you've got an HR team that is screening them for you over the phone, then give them a list of standard questions and ask them to rate it on a scale. Do a point system so that you can measure candidate against candidate and what that score is. And the other thing that is so important is to make sure that you get salary addressed. If they're a great candidate but they want way more money than you can pay them, then it's not a fit. If you can't meet them there, there's no sense to continue that interview process because you're wasting each other's time. The second step is I like to bring the candidate in and do an interview where I will bring in another manager, or I'll bring in a sales rep on my team who has leadership aspirations so I can start coaching them on how to interview. And I want that other person there to give me a different perspective. So if I've got a couple great candidates and I want some other thoughts on what those candidates bring to the table and how they rank them, then it's great to have that second piece of feedback. And I would have a list of topics or questions that you want to make sure you ask during the interview. You don't want to leave your interview and go, oh, I forgot to ask that question. I wanted to dig into that. And I always wrap my questions around the topics, those 5 topics that I showed you earlier of what I was looking for. And you can have your go-to questions. I have some questions that I always do like to ask, which I'm going to go through with you in a minute. The last stage that we do is a group interview. And I'll bring in 5 or 6 people from the sales team to interview the candidate with me. And the idea behind that is I really want to make sure that they're a good fit for our team. I want the feedback from my sales reps to say, yes, this person is going to fit in well with our team. And I also want the candidate to have a look at what our team dynamic is and see if they can see themselves working with us, because it's got to be a good fit on both sides. So the way that format goes is that we do a sales presentation for the first 15 minutes. I want to see if the person has presentation skills, and I'm also checking to see can they objection handle and can they have a pricing conversation. Then the next 30 minutes is we just do a general question and answer period where the sales reps get a chance to interview the candidate and the candidate can interview the sales reps. And then in the last 15 minutes, I leave the interview. I want the candidate to have the opportunity to ask my team anything about me, how I am as a leader, what's the rest of the company leadership like, so that they can really understand what my style of leadership is and if they feel like I'm someone who can coach and lead them. So here's some of those questions that I promised. The first one I ask is, what would you put in your ideal job description? So what I'm looking for here is to find out if they're achievers. Are they driven to results? Can they relate? Do they enjoy talking to people? I'm also looking for yellow lights. So is there anything they have in their job description that's not in the role that I'm hiring for? For instance, if someone were to say in their ideal job description, it's full of leadership tasks and things, and I'm just hiring a sales rep role, then that's a yellow light for me that it may not be a fit. The second one is I want to know what they consider their top skills as a sales rep. I'm looking for what I think is important is being a good listener and a good communicator, someone who is creative and curious. And if they have different skills, then it may be that they're not right for Unbounce or they're not right for the role. The other question I like to ask is, tell me about the achievement you're most proud of. And that question might sound a little cliche, but I find I get really good answers to these questions. And a lot of times, these answers don't actually deal with work. A lot of people end up giving a personal achievement in their life. And by getting that answer, it gives you a little more insight as to who they are as a person and what they value. At the same time, I'm also to want to see if we can have a conversation. Is it something that I have to lead with them, or are they going to be an equal partner? And that shows me if they're good at building relationships and if that person and I are going to have a synergy and a chemistry. Because if I don't feel like I can talk to that person and coach them, then it's not going to work. And lastly, we have a lot of people who apply for Unbounce and they say that they want to work in Unbounce because we've got a great culture. And while that's true, a lot of people do also apply at Unbounce because we've got great benefits, especially for a company in North America. We give 4 weeks vacation right off the bat, which for you guys probably doesn't sound like a very good deal, but it is in Canada. So I want to understand if they really know what our values are. Our values are plastered all over our website. As a company, we really do live by our values, and I want to see if they actually did their research on the company and know what they are, and then what resonates for them as a person, because depending on what they say, I feel like that's going to reinforce who they're going to be as a salesperson and how they're going to represent our company. So now you've hired that person, you need to onboard and train them. And as a company, we, over the first 2 weeks, do a series of onboarding sessions where every senior leader in the company presents on their department to the new cohort of new hires. During that time, I also start all of my sales reps in support. And they will spend 3 weeks working on our support team. And the idea behind that is that they're going to learn our product, so that when they actually start selling, they can sell with confidence and answer questions. They're going to learn the business of our customers and know what they deal with on a day-to-day basis and the challenges that they have, as well as some of the challenges that they will have within Unbounce. And I also want them to learn empathy for our support team and what they do on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes support can be a thankless job, so I want to make sure that our sales team can appreciate what they're doing. And it also allows them to establish relationships with our support team so that if they do get into a situation where they need help, they've already built that relationship and they can feel comfortable going and talking to the support person. Let's talk a little bit about growing the talent. You want to make sure that you've spent all this time finding great talent. How do you retain that talent? And And that means you need to continue to grow your people and continue to provide feedback. One of the most important things to growing your talent is having one-on-one conversations with your team individually. A lot of time, these get canceled, or when people get busy, they cancel them. And for me as a leader, in my view, the most important thing that I can do is coach my staff. They're the ones who are going to hit my quota. They're the ones who need to know that I care about them. And the way I can show that is by spending an hour with them. So if you think about an average week as 40-ish hours, and you spend 1 hour a week with each sales rep, that's 2.5% of your time. That's not very much. So don't cancel your one-on-ones. Make sure you have them. Use them as an opportunity to coach them. Remember, it's also your employees' time. So let them bring their questions and their issues to the table as well. So some of the things that I discuss in my one-on-one are the open deals. So at Unbounce, we have our average sales cycle is 3 minutes, or 3 months. It's a really fast sale. So I want to track the open deals they have for the month and the open deals that they have for the quarter. I also want them to forecast. So they give me a first call forecast at the beginning of the month, and then we do an ongoing forecast as the month goes. We'll also spend some time on talking things like, what do they need help with? Is there any projects that they're doing that we need to discuss the progress on? And I also have them set quarterly and annual goals, because as salespeople, they're always going to have their quota as a goal, but I want to make sure that they're more fulfilled and that they've got goals that they're achieving outside of that quota, which is going to make them more satisfied in their role and help with their growth. We also use 15-5 as a light performance management tool. So that gives our staff the opportunity to spend 15 minutes answering 5 or 6 questions on a Friday. The leadership spends 5 minutes reviewing them, and then you can action on any of that information. And as a company, we do that all the way up to the CEO level. And feedback is really important. Make sure that you are creating a company that has a culture of feedback. And at Unbounce, we're currently going through the process of training all of our staff on this model. And this is great to use after you've sat in a coaching session with your sales team on a sales call, is what went well, what was tricky, and what would you do differently? So you ask your staff those 3 questions, gives them time to reflect, and then at the end, you ask them permission to give them feedback. They're not going to say no, you're going to give them that feedback anyways, but it gives them a moment to prepare and say, yes, I'm ready to accept that feedback. So takeaways from this session, I've tried to provide a lot of different things that I hope you can take away. Things that you can implement right away is, on your drive home or your flight or your train ride home, evaluate your team and ask yourself, are they high performing? Do I have the right roles, and do I have the right people in them? Book a coffee. You've come here. This is a networking event, and one of the great things about a networking event is all the people that you meet. So book a coffee with someone. Expand your network with your peers, or perhaps there's a potential candidate here in the room. So that can be a coffee in person. Maybe it's a beer tonight, or even a virtual meeting. Arrange a team event. It can be something really simple that you go out for a couple of hours, or you do the remote game. And update your interview process. Make sure you're asking the right questions and you're doing a thorough job of interviewing your candidates. So next 10 sales for Unbounce. I mentioned that Unbounce just finished our first full year of sales, and because we have a good sales methodology, we've been able to take some of that data insight and look at what are the best customers for Unbounce? Who's the most successful and who stays around? And so we know that a lot of that has to do with, can correlate to AdWords spend and Alexa ranking. And so we've been able to create more of a niche market around the customers that we want to communicate and target with, as opposed to before where it was a much more broader range. So we're being much more specific about the niche that we're going after. We've also launched a new product this year, a new tool for overlays, which is another more of a B2C market. That's an avenue that we'll be going after. And I'll say that our sales reps, they have a good consistent methodology. They get a lot of coaching. So while I'm always hiring and building out my team, they're always closing. So thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. We still have some time for some questions. So if I see any hands in the audience, I will happily run over to you. But I'm going to start with maybe a tough one. Because, again, I get this question a lot. Hiring salespeople, sometimes it's a science, but there's always an element of risk, and sometimes we get it wrong. For you and for Unbounce, what is the stage when you have to say goodbye to somebody? Have you had that experience? Have you had to let anybody go from your sales team? And how to kind of, even after the fact of hiring someone, what are some of the telltale signs where you have to kind of cut the cord at certain points?
Yeah, so I've let, the person ended up leaving, which is, I think, kind of the best scenario if you've got someone who isn't a good fit. Through a series of conversations, if you can help that person come to the realization that it's not a good fit, and help them off board, potentially get another job, then that's the best scenario. And I think that it goes back to that model of feedback. You need to make sure that you're communicating every week and giving feedback. And I think it goes back to the coachability that I talked about as one of the key elements that I'm looking for. So if you hire someone and you don't find that they're open to the coaching or they're receptive to the coaching, then the chances of them growing and being a good fit for your team are not. So I would say it goes back to failing fast. Don't be afraid to identify performance issues, creating a performance plan, and then be very clear and specific about what those goals are of the performance plan. If they don't meet them, then you need to offboard them.
Makes sense, thank you. Do we have any questions in the room? Oh, here we go, here's one.
How long is your onboarding process?
It's about 6 weeks. So while that is the full extent of the program, they also do start working in real life during that time. So it starts off very heavy. The first 3 to 4 weeks are all focused on training, and then during that third week they start to transition into less training and taking on more of the functions of the role.
Perfect. One more question, I'm afraid. 1 second.
How important is it to hire someone who has a sales background, or is it not important, but he other skills and talents? How do you?
I think it goes back to coachability. So if you hire someone who doesn't have any sales experience, then you need to deem them to be extremely coachable. I prefer to hire someone who does have sales experience and who has a sales experience in the tech sector, because when they bring that to the table, it's just a better starting point. And then if you can get industry specific, that's even better. So if I can hire someone who knows about digital marketing and landing pages and overlays, then that's a whole bunch of training that you don't need to go through. But I think you can have great people, like I said, if they're coachable. So Emily that I showed, she's a soccer player. She's never had a real job. And I hired her, and she's a fantastic salesperson.
Do you have any internal hires? So someone that starts in a different department and then goes like, I want to do sales. And how is that politically internally? Is that difficult?
Yeah, it is. So although I will say when I worked at Active, it was not political, but that was a 3,500 person organization, and there was a much better view of if you hire somebody into the organization, it's more valuable for them to switch teams. And so I'm trying to bring that into Unbounce and say if somebody works at Unbounce and they're on one team, they want to move to another role, that's great for Unbounce, because they're just going to have more viewpoints and more information that they're bringing to the table as to how the company operates than to lose them and have them go somewhere else. So I've actually had 4 people transfer from other teams, and right now I have a team of 12. So 4 people, so that's pretty significant, and 2 of those people have come from the marketing team, and they actually are probably the 2 best talents that the marketing team had. So yes, that was political, and both times the the marketing team tried to stop it, which is funny seeing as I report into the CMO. But from my standpoint, if someone comes to me and they're from another team, I'll have a conversation with them, and then I say, if you are interested in pursuing this, you need to go talk to your manager first. I'm not in the business of stealing people, so it needs to be a conversation with everybody involved.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jane. Again, thank you. A round of applause. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you very much.